So yeah, welcome everybody. This is our second monthly training on organization and structure. If you weren't here for the first few minutes, I'll go ahead and apologize again. My co-host did lose internet about 30 seconds before the start of this, so sorry for the little bit of disorganization. He was my host and going to be running this through. I'll take over until he can go ahead and join back in. But thank you everybody for joining us. Our previous one was a great webinar and had some really useful conversations. We were able to show off some really neat features and ideas for organizing and structuring your documentation. That one was focused on asset layouts. This one's going to be focused on a little bit more of the organization standpoint. So starting off, my name is Jordan Hart. I am the product manager here um, at Hudu, and a couple ground rules. We're going to try and answer as many questions as possible. We want this to be as interactive of a webinar as possible, but we are going to try and stick around questions that are focused on the topics of this webinar. If you have any additional questions or questions on certain features that we may not be covering, please go ahead and shoot those over to my email, jordan@hudu.com. You can email daniel.nelson@hudu.com, or our support team, support@hudu.com. We'd be happy to answer those, but for the purposes of this webinar, we're going to try and stick around the conversations, the topics of the presentation. A quick overview of the documentation series. One of our big goals of 2024 has been to release content around enhancing your documentation, whether that's building a culture of documentation within your organization, or better organization and structure of your documentation, from naming standards and how to document certain different areas. We've released a ton of different blogs related to content on this. We've released videos, and we have helpful tips, both Hudu related and non-Hudu related, if you're potentially using a different product. And then kind of what we're going to be going through today is really exploring Hudu on the topic of, documentation series, blogs, tips and tricks, downloadable resources, lots of cool stuff as part of this series. For today, though, we're going to be exploring naming standards and folder structure. That'll include things like password tags and organizing your passwords utilizing folders versus tags versus maybe just changing the name. We'll explore managing vendors and locations and try to provide some success strategies for how to do that. There's a ton of different ways that you can go ahead and approach that, and it really depends on how you're documenting and how your team's structured for what makes the best sense for you. And then finally, we're going to hop into relationships. So if you are managing vendors and locations differently, you may have to set up the relationships differently. The nice thing about Hudu is it allows that customization with how you structure your documentation and how you relate everything together so that your technicians can navigate that information as much as possible. So hopping into the product real quick, and I'll pull up chat one more time. I don't know why it's not staying on my screen for me. All right, there we go. Yeah, so hopping into the product, I'm going to touch first on kind of naming standards and some of the things that you can do with the naming standards to enhance the usability of your documentation. So hopping into our Atlas company here, you can kind of see on this sidebar, we have a certain structure for how we're naming our asset layouts. This can really help with organization within your environment and allowing your technicians to have a single structure that they can utilize for all companies within your environment. So as most of you may know, Hudu is structured in a standardized way, meaning the asset layouts that I create for my Hudu environment will be persistent across all of the companies within Hudu. So giving those asset layouts a similar naming structure can allow them to stay in the exact same spot, regardless of which company you're in. One thing we do recommend is utilizing some sort of numerical ordering of these so that they are in that exact spot. And with this, you kind of have to think about how many asset layouts you will have. If you're going to have a number between 1 and 9, you may be able to get away with single numerical ordering, so 1 through 9. But if you're going to have additional, or potentially with our larger customers, we've seen hundreds of asset layouts, you may need to have three different levels of that numerical. So 000 being that first one, 10 to 99, keeping it at that 00. Another big part of organizing your documentation would be your folder structure. So keeping on this screen, we can see the folder structure here that we've built out for our asset layouts. And in this case, we do have 9 or less folders. So we've kept it at that single digit. But this again just allows us to lay out our documentation exactly how we want to see it. In this case, we have some internal documentation. We have asset layouts that relate to computing, networking, and then kind of a catch-all in our other. Other parts where naming standards and folder structure come into play to keep your documentation organized is going to be in the knowledge base as well as our passwords. So I'll click into our knowledge base real quick and show off kind of the folder structure here, as this is a great way to keep knowledge organized, and this would apply both to company specific knowledge as well as your global knowledge base. Here we can see we have a folder for standard operating procedures, which has 5 articles, and then we've got it broken down even further to the department that these articles relate to. This will make it really easy for technicians to come into the knowledge base if they're searching for a document and they're part of a particular department, or looking for procedures or how-to guides that relate to a particular document. We can go ahead and give them that easy navigation here. One thing I do want to note about folder structure and creating folders within your documentation is, although there is no limitation on the number of folders and subfolders that you can have, you do kind of want to limit this within your organization, as more subfolders does mean it is more organized, but it's also slowing down your technicians when they're actually trying to find this information. If I have to click into 3 to 5 subfolders to get to the information I need, it's actually not as productive or as efficient for your technicians. Again, you can see the naming standards that we have, and there's a ton of different nomenclature that you can use. There's a couple ones that you want to stay away from, like using special characters that won't be searchable. So asterisks, backsplashes, those tend to not be searchable within products, Hudu included. So those you do want to stick away from. Things like dashes, underscores, periods, those all are included in the search and are a great way of organizing that documentation while still allowing it to be searchable. Lastly, I was going to show for naming standards and folder structure, I was going to show off the password section. Again, you can see that we have a standard naming format as well as numerical ordering of these to keep those folders in the exact position that we'd want them to be in. And then for password organization, we have an additional layer, which is our password tags. These are a great way to group different information or different entries with a single tag so that you can easily organize those and see those. Your technicians can easily navigate to them. If I know Daniel had a couple topics on naming standards, so if he is able to hop back in on that, I'll circle back to naming standards and folder structure so he can touch on a couple additional things. And looks like we got a couple questions. First one we got, talking about search, I believe we were able to search for articles by text that might exist within them, but not anymore right now. So you are still able to search for information that may exist within knowledge base articles. We've got a couple changes to search that may be causing that effect. The first one is our comprehensive text, our comprehensive search filter. So if I go ahead and search, say, test, because I am within Atlas Company, it'll search only within that. I can go ahead and exit out of that filter. But we've got this comprehensive search filter here. That will allow you to search through not just the titles of information, titles and headers, but it'll actually allow you to search through the content of the information as well. On top of that, if you really like this comprehensive search and how it works, you can actually enable this by default through the Profile tab. So you can go ahead and edit Profile, enable comprehensive search as the default, and then any of the searches that you make will be on that comprehensive. We've got another one. How far away is the global asset lookup for asset fields? I want to restructure some fields. Emil, I guess, would you mind clarifying on that? We do have the global asset lookup within the admin tab, but I may be misunderstanding your question a little bit. Cool. So carrying on, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the different ways that you can manage vendor accounts. This is one of the most popular questions, one of them that we get within Hudu is how do you manage vendor accounts? And unfortunately, there's not really a straightforward answer to what is the best solution. The best solution is the one that fits within your organization structure and works for your team. A couple strategies that we've seen within for managing vendors. Um, First is going to be creating a asset layout for vendors. Vendors could be created as an asset layout, and then you can store specific information on those particular vendors that allow you to relate the other assets to that specific vendor. So I unfortunately, let's see, I think he had one built out for me, but let me just take a look. There we go. We've got our vendors asset layout here. Again, we are still within our Atlas Company Inc. And we have this vendors asset layout built out. It has some details on these particular vendors, such as status, manufacturer, maybe web page, and primary contact. And then what we can go ahead and do is relate these to the information for these or to the assets that this particular vendor applies to. We can do that in a couple of different ways. We can use our standard related items interface, which allows us to choose different custom assets, companies, articles, passwords to relate to. That could be limited to the company that I am within, or we can go ahead and create a global search to other companies. This will become more relevant a little in a second once I talk about the other method and relating and to global companies. But that's a great way. One thing that I do hear about this method of using this related items sidebar is that technicians tend to forget to relate items. Our solution for that would actually be the other relationship system that's built within Hudu, which would be our asset link field. Within this asset layout, we can go ahead and create an asset link field and mark that as required, which would then allow you to force your technicians to input that information. And I'll keep touching on that as we talk about locations because it becomes relevant once again. The other way that we see vendors being managed within Hudu would actually be creating a separate company for these vendors. That could be accomplished two separate ways. You could either create a single company that houses all of your vendors' information. You would again be creating a single asset layout for these, or potentially dividing them based on the type. Again, like we have folders, they could be networking vendors, they could be computing vendors, they could be a lot of different types. but all managed within a single vendor account or company. Welcome back, Daniel. How's the internet?
Yeah, we're back on. Sorry about that, everyone. Timing of things in our industry, you preparing for something, and literally the second I was about to hit start on the webinar, everything went out. So appreciate your patience with me, and at least we got Jordan here taking us through everything. But I'll jump in as we get back into things here.
Yeah, absolutely. Daniel, just to catch you up, I've talked a little bit about naming standards and folder structure. I know you had some specific things you were going to mention, so we can circle back to that. I've talked about vendors and managing those via the asset layout, tying in a little bit of the relationship topics that we'll talk about later down the road. I have mainly gotten into a single vendor and through the asset layouts, though.
Perfect.
And I'll go ahead and stop share if you want to take over.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Let's see here.
And we'll just hope your internet doesn't go out again.
No, we should be all good here now. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Good to see some familiar faces that I know I've been emailing with today and everything. And yeah, glad to have you in here for this training. Let me get this off the page here. Alrighty, so yeah, kind of just to go off of what Jordan was just touching on there, we can go into our talking about vendors, locations, and utilizing relationships. And Jordan, if I'm touching on anything that you already maybe mentioned or anything, then feel free to kind of hop in. Um, so yeah, we get asked all the time, kind of, how do I document my vendors? How do I document my locations? And so the kind of great thing about Hudu here, is that there's lots of different ways to do things. And so here's some examples, which I know Jordan just mentioned, of documenting vendors and locations as asset layouts. So within here, we can have all of our vendors that we use for this specific company, Atlas Inc., documented here, what the fields that we create. We can jump into one and we have all of our different fields that we want to be tracking for this vendor. I don't know if Jordan showed it off yet, but obviously we're showing off some of these fields. It's also good to show off the actual asset layout that we've created for this. And if anyone wants to, take screenshots or ask questions about different fields that you could track, again, this is just an example of the vendor's asset layout that we've created for some useful information that we could see you and your company's tracking for your vendors. Jordan, if you want to touch on the question that you said you'd answered to for vendors here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a question from Josh. Is the vendor's asset you have there syncing from something, or is that manually entered information? So for our particular case, this is all manually entered information into these fields that Daniel's showing off. We've essentially built a vendor's asset layout, customized the fields to include what information we'd like to be visible on that field, and then our technicians have gone through and populated that information. It is a kind of a good transition into the other method of that I was starting to touch on, of managing vendors with that separate company. One way that you can go ahead and do that is, if you're utilizing those separate companies, a lot of the times when you integrate with PSAs or RMMs, the integration will uh, the integration will go ahead and create those companies for you. So that's kind of when we start to recommend actually having separate companies for each of them, would be when your integration is creating those companies. There's no sense in creating an asset layout if the integration is creating those companies for you, and then utilizing that global relationship that I started to touch on, by relating those back to, say, Atlas assets or a test company asset. That way, you're still creating that map of interrelated information, and the information on the vendor is coming from the PSA, so it doesn't need to be re-entered.
So, and yeah, like a good example of that, and I guess we're talking about vendors and locations here, but locations is probably just the best way to show it off with also Hudu having the feature of allowing you to have child companies. So this is going to be that other form where, and again, the bottom line of this is set your Hudu instance up in the way that your techs and whoever needs to find information is going to be easily able to do so. And whatever's going to be kind of again, like the easiest way for techs to go in and find information. So if you have, let's say, two companies here, we have Atlas Company Inc., and we maybe have a child company. So in Hudu, how things are stored at the company level, because everything is separate within companies outside of those global relationships that we talked about, if the documentation between different companies or different vendors is going to be separate, completely separate, then it may make most sense to have another company for your other location or other vendors, kind of like we see here. And then what we can go in is, maybe we need to add, let's just go in and add an application, for instance. And let's say we need to relate this to our other company that we have as well. The nice thing about using related items here is we don't have to limit it just to the company that we're in. So if we want to create a global relationship with another asset or another vendor or whatever it may be, we can do that here, but we can also just link it to that other company. So if we want to link it to the child company or another company called vendors, where you store all your vendors in there, then you can do that as well and match it with the relevant related item here. Again, making sure that you just have that easy access, one click away from the vendor or location that you're looking for. So again, there's a couple different strategies to do here. And we have a question in here. Oh, Jordan, you want to go ahead and take
Yeah,
that one?
yeah, absolutely. So this one was a question that popped up earlier. I just needed some clarification. This is from Emil regarding the global asset lookup example serial number asset field on a specific asset layout. Today we can only search name of an asset layout. Emil, I believe this is going to relate back to that comprehensive filtering. I believe if you enter that comprehensive field, it should be able to search the serial number. I'll do some testing just to make sure, but enabling that comprehensive search should allow you to. And again, you can make that the default if you'd like by going to your profile page.
Profile, and this will take you here. You can default to comprehensive search here. Um, so yeah, the other thing, and I know we've kind of been bouncing around from vendors, locations, and relationships here, but they really do all tie together here. I mean, more so, you're going to use relationships to create those links between relevant items in Hudu, and a lot of the times locations and vendors are those things that you want to have linked directly to, a specific company, person, whatever it may be, so you know where things are and what's attached and linked to what. And so one of the things that we also touch on is, let me jump into an example location we have here within this company. So as I'm sure many of you are familiar with, you can have these related items over here on the right-hand side, both globally, both within a company, and again, can easily bounce back between those related items. The other form of adding a relation between another asset, kind of an asset to asset link, is going to be our asset link field type. So what we see here, and we kind of went over this in our last training with asset layouts themselves, but this is primarily relevant for relationships, so definitely wanted to touch on it again. So with our asset link field, again, it's just another form of establishing relationships. And a huge benefit of utilizing the asset link field is you can make it required. So a lot of the times when, techs are documenting, you may forget to add a relationship, or something may get kind of lost in translation when you're adding documentation. You may add all the documentation in here for a location, but maybe forget to relate the people that are at that location or servers or devices, whatever it may be. The asset link field, again, we can make required. So when we're filling out our documentation for a specific location or vendor, we can easily just set up that field and make sure that our relationships within that field are easily being added, and we can jump into that documentation that we need. Again, utilizing that field type, making it required like we can here. If I go into the primary point of contact where I'm using that asset link and just have that field required, we know that it's going to be filled in, and the primary contact in this instance will always be there for us, and we'll make sure that that's documented every time. Jordan, you want to expand on anything with the asset link or related items there?
Not too much. The only thing I'll add is thank you again for everybody coming to the training webinar last time. Actually, this asset link field was expanded on because of that training webinar. You can now search all asset layouts as opposed to before you had to specify a certain asset layout. So one of the most common things we see with this is like network devices. Maybe it's you have devices as routers and servers and firewalls. You could actually just specify all asset layouts, and it won't make you create 3 separate fields for that. Again, that was directly from the feedback we received last webinar. So that's why these are so cool.
Yeah, they are. We get questions all the time. How do you decide what features to implement? And to be honest, the majority of them is from our customers and adding features on the public roadmap, and um things like this where you suggest something that is really cool that maybe we haven't thought about, and we can go implement it in our next release or two. So we definitely appreciate all of the comments and the suggestions that you make. They definitely do go a long way.
We've got another question from Josh just regarding this asset link field. Does it work with companies? Josh, at this time, the asset link field will only allow you to relate to different asset layouts. If you need to relate to companies, you'd have to use that right-hand sidebar, the standard relationship system. This is actually something that is on our roadmap, though, is a new relationship field for asset layouts, and that would allow you to use kind of the standard relationship field within an asset layout field itself. So we've been talking about this a lot internally recently, and so we'll probably be seeing that relatively soon. Great question, though.
Yeah, and yeah, so in terms of the manual, good question here. So if I just jump back into the asset link field example that I was just in, and let's just go through this. So basically when I select asset link, what it's going to do is if I select people, for instance, here, so I'm asset link to people. What that is going to do is when I go in and add this documentation, let me just add a new location, for example, here, and here's our primary point of contact. So this dropdown, like you mentioned, it's going to show all of our relevant assets for this specific company. That being said, I can just search in here as well. So if I know that my person that I'm relating this to is Tom, then I'll just search when I'm actually adding in the documentation. So I think this is kind of what you mean here with what you would fill it in this section when you're actually adding the documentation in here. But yeah, it's completely searchable within all of your again, I had this related to people. Here we have our people, which come directly from our asset layout here. Can search globally for vendors. So do you mean within the asset link field itself, or do you mean just searching in general? If we're just searching in general, then we have our vendors asset layout, which if we're searching for specific vendors, okay, just here in the asset link field. So It wouldn't search globally if we're adding the asset link field itself. It will search within the company that we're actually a part of at that time. And Jordan, correct me if I'm missing anything with that.
Yeah, just double checking functionality. I do believe we actually enabled the global search for those asset links in one of the more recent updates. So yes, actually, if you were looking at um, an actual asset and you are editing that and trying to add asset links, there is a check mark underneath that allows you to enable global search so you could search across companies.
So what he's mentioning here is if I jump into this, we have this little global search right here. So if I want to search globally within everything, and let me just go back here, global search, then we can search within all of our assets within that layout as well. Let me jump back into one that and again, I apologize that with my internet issues, I believe that that is pretty much everything we wanted to cover. And now we can kind of just go into the Q&A portion. Jordan, if there's anything that needs to be expanded on or added on. I know we've kind of been going through the Q&A as it is, which is great. We want this experience to be super interactive. So we're super happy that you always come with all the questions. It's super nice for us and just establishes that interactive community that we want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of the main points were covered. I will mention, Manuel, I think you actually asked me in a call last week if there's any ability to see kind of a general overview of which companies are using which vendors. If you are still looking for that, I actually ran across a pretty neat script yesterday that allows you to do that. And what he's essentially doing with the script is we'll take our Atlas company here. If this Atlas company is creating a Magic Dash script for, say, Microsoft 365, he's actually duplicating that script and he has a separate company for Microsoft 365 as a vendor. And he's duplicating that script and that Magic Dash component to put it into that. So essentially, what this does is any company that has that Magic Dash script for, say, 365, if it's put on that company's page, he's also duplicating it on an actual Microsoft 365 vendor company page. So he has that good overview of all of the products as well as potentially other things. If it was ConnectWise, he could see all of the overdue tickets for ConnectWise on that single vendor page. I'll go ahead and link the YouTube video where this is talked about in the chat, just so if anybody's curious, they can take a look. I do believe it occurs at 22 minutes if you don't want to watch the whole thing. But it's a really neat way to utilize the Magic Dash and organize different vendor information.
And yeah, Jordan, we have a question in the Q&A here that is basically talking about different utilizing different asset layouts, like say the vendor's asset layout in specific, and we have the asset layout itself built out, and asset layouts are created globally, so the fields we add here are going to be relevant across our entire Hudu instance. Now the question here is basically, in some use cases, specific companies may have more detailed vendor information, or maybe just that's relevant to all of our asset layouts. Maybe some companies just need additional fields or have kind of more complex information that needs to be tracked. And the question here is kind of, are there plans to have any more flexibility? So you can maybe have a vendor's asset layout for a company with maybe a little bit less fields and one with more advanced fields here. And I did just enable chat for everyone as well, just so everyone knows. And yeah, Precious, to answer your question right now, specifically, so again, like I mentioned, currently these asset layouts, you'd create them, and currently probably what I would recommend is just having all of those fields that you would think may be relevant to track for your vendors. So like you mentioned here, like um, you know, renewal dates, contract terms, items like that. And we see that here with some of our fields. That is essentially sometimes why the make the field required or making a field required can be useful as well, is those required fields are what's going to be filled out every single time. Now, what you can do with some fields as well, like let's say renewal date, for example, what we can do is we can also basically add additional like information. So you can add a little hint here for renewal date, for instance, and only for companies that need one or something along those lines. Um, and basically right now, when we update this field here, we can go into our vendor's asset layout like we saw. And when somebody's filling out documentation here, adding a new vendor, and we go down to our renewal date, we'll see a little text box here that is only for companies. Again, this can be kind of up for interpretation of what you write in this sentence is. But again, that'd be probably my recommendation at this point, is just to make the fields required that are going to be used every single time, and then add these little hints here for maybe company specific vendors and other documentation like that.
Uh, Emil has a question. Did you create the Duo Magic Dash by script, or does the script look up the asset? I believe in that one it was just created via an API call, um, a short little script to place the number of users. There's quite a bit of functionality that I've seen built out on that. I just don't think we have it enabled in ours. I will go ahead and link another great resource on the Magic Dash that has some other scripts built out for you. Um, but Magic Dash really is kind of the feature of Hudu, in my opinion. The amount of customization and things that you can do with it, if you're familiar with a scripting language, is quite incredible. The things that people have kind of taken the Magic Dash and just the API in general and ran with is great to see. So that link that I just posted has a ton of additional Magic Dash scripts. Um, they can also be found in various places in our MSP Geek Slack/Discord channel, as well as on our Reddit. We have tons of those resources as well. Manuel has a question. When we choose to document vendors as separate companies, we can easily use this asset link field with global search to map this vendor and all other customers' assets relevant to it. So that would really depend on if you were managing. So if you're creating separate companies for the vendors and you don't have an asset layout, that asset link field is not going to be the solution for you, as that only allows you to link to different asset layouts. So if you had a single vendor company with an asset layout broken into either different asset layouts depending on the vendor type, or even just a single asset layout with every vendor, you would be able to use that asset link field to link over to that. If it is just a company, you would have to use that standard relationship system on the right-hand sidebar to go ahead and do that. Again, we are planning to enhance the relationship system within a field in the future. Hopefully, by the end of this year, we'll have something for this that would likely allow you to do what you're talking about. But right now, you would have to use the standard relationship system on the right-hand sidebar.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Jordan, for elaborating on that. Again, we still have some time here. Obviously don't want to, take up too much of your time today, but we do want to make sure that all of your questions are getting answered. And so feel free to keep tossing them in the Q&A. Um, I will touch quickly just, and again, if you have more questions, put them in the Q&A, but I will touch quickly on just what is coming up. And again, because I was kind of out of the loop with anything with the internet going down, I'm going to just jump back into the slide here. So resources coming soon for you. If it wants to go in for me. So
I didn't touch
resources.
on the resources coming soon, Daniel, so you're all good.
Oh, you already touched on the AMA and
Did
everything?
not, did not, sorry.
Perfect. So, yeah, in terms of kind of, I guess, events coming soon, we are hosting as part of this documentation series that we've been in, a 1 hour long AMA with Amanda Le Chapelle. She is a she's the COO of B4 Networks and has a lot of experience with utilizing Hudu in their own company, managing the structure and organization specifically of kind of making sure that everything is structured and organized in a way that makes sense for their company. And so, we thought obviously we're here to help you in whatever ways we can, but what better way of getting help from somebody that is actually utilizing the tool every day, setting up that organization and structure for their MSP, and making sure that kind of everything is flowing the way it needs to be. So that's going to be taking place on Reddit at 11 a.m. next Thursday, August 22nd. It's already open for you. It doesn't go live until that time, but if you have questions that you want to ask beforehand, go to our Reddit page. You can type in your questions already, and we can make sure to get all those answered from you from again somebody that truly is in Hudu and setting up the organization and structure of their instance every day. So super excited for that. And again, if you have questions that you want to hear from somebody actually using, these practices and best practices that we've been talking about, then feel free to go in and ask some questions there. Again, we put this on our last webinar as well, but we do have lots of other resources for you. Our support team, our sales team, billing portal for HQ, our community, like I just mentioned with Reddit, we're constantly posting in there, constantly helping people by answering questions and making sure that all of our Reddit posts are being looked at and getting answered. MSP Geek is another great community for this as well. Highly recommend being active in these communities. I'm sure a lot of you found this post from Reddit. So again, a lot more webinar posts and other posts coming out there soon. And then same thing here with our blog. We've been posting lots of different blogs as well as tips and tricks for items that we've discussed in this series. We'll continue to do so even moving forward to our next documentation series. Thank you for joining. Again, we'll feel free to stick on for, another couple minutes here. If you do have questions, I'll just jump back into the Hudu environment here, and we're more than happy to kind of answer any questions that you have here. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. Sorry about the if you are going to hop off, sorry about the internet issues earlier. I'm happy I was able to jump back on and talk through some things here with all you. Yeah,
So
Josh, no
we've got a
problem.
question about bulk moving of passwords into folders. You should be able to bulk move fast passwords. Daniel, if you go ahead and kind of show that off. Um, we can go into a particular password and you can choose either that top checkbox or others, and then go ahead and select this bulk actions. This will allow you to move them into different companies if you need to move those across different companies, or change folders will then allow you to select the folder type. This can also be done via the individual record if you'd like, but if in terms of bulk managing, you should be able to move folders that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
It was
So
just a question asking to see it again. Absolutely.
yep. So again, we can either check these boxes off individually if we just want to move maybe these three, hit the bulk actions button and either change company or change folder. If I want to move these passwords into our level 1 passwords folder, I can just select that folder and we'll go ahead and then update, and that will move the passwords into that folder. If you want to move all the passwords, you can just hit this main checkbox, and again, same functionality applies. You can also do this just in, like Jordan mentioned, you can do a singular password this way, or you can do it from the password itself, changing the company here. But so you can change company from that area. Again, if you want to bulk move it to a folder, like you mentioned, it's as simple as just hitting the bulk actions button here.
Manuel's got a question. Will password tags be supported in the browser plugin and mobile app? Yes, we do have plans to support those in at least the browser extension. I'm actually not quite sure about the mobile app quite yet. We actually have a lot of plans to expand the tagging capabilities within the product quite a bit in the very near future. I would imagine we're trying to get that kind of completed before it gets introduced to the browser extension. But we likely will have a solution for the browser extension at the very least for password tags as well. Unfortunately, I don't know an exact ETA on that. Again, kind of the tagging functionality overall is pretty soon, and then likely the browser extension would follow. We've got a question from Shane on the topic of bulk moving passwords. If you accidentally imported them into my vault, is there a way to move them, or would I need to export and re-import? I believe there is no ability to move passwords from my vault. I'm just checking on that functionality right now. But I don't believe there's the ability to move bulk move passwords from the my vault to a company. You would need to export those and re-import, or just import again into a company's password vault. Emil's got a question. Any way to create standard KB folders for all company or all customers, like customer password folders? There's not at this time. The only ones that can be created, only folders that can be created at a global level would be the asset layouts or the password folders. Unfortunately, the company KB folders would not be able to be created at a global level. It's a decent idea though, and I would highly suggest requesting that as a feature request on our feedback.hudu.com page. Again, we're kind of taking a look at folders and tags and organization of environments right now, so it's a really good time to go ahead and request that.
Alrighty, so it does look like we wrapped up. Oh, we do have a yeah, we got a question on, does the bulk movement action got to do with the privilege you have on Hudu? And so I imagine you are meaning the like permissions, the kind of user permissions that an individual has. Um, Jordan, do you know if there's specific role level that cannot bulk move passwords from another folder?
Not that I don't believe a spectator would be able to, but I believe author and above should be able to bulk move. But let me double check that functionality.
Speaking of that,
Editor account can.
Speaking of that too, another cool tip that if you didn't know that you're able to do this, if you're ever curious about the things like this for your specific users, you can go into your user levels and like for instance, here we have an author. And maybe if we want to see if an author is able to do this, we can go ahead and click into their profile and actually impersonate that user. That's going to basically show me what this user can see in Hudu. And so now if I jump into the companies tab, back into the company here, and let's go into the passwords, we can see that we actually don't have those bulk permissions here as the author level. So again, pretty cool thing that you can do if you didn't know that. Another tip here is if you're ever curious about what can my editors actually do in Hudu, you can always impersonate them and see exactly what those role levels are able to do.
So that would, Precious, to answer your question, that would mean yes, the spectators and author users cannot bulk move.
So editors and above. Alrighty. So again, I do believe we've answered all the questions in the Q&A. We'll go ahead and give you 5 minutes back of your day. Again, I apologize everyone for the internet issues, but thank you, Jordan, for kind of filling everyone in on this monthly training. And thanks again, everyone, for joining. We're super happy to do these. We love doing these and interacting with you guys. And that's the whole kind of vision that we have here at Hudu is just making sure everything's interactive and that you have your questions, you have the ability to get your questions answered and submit new feature requests and new ideas for us as well. Hopefully you learned something today, something new about Hudu. And yeah, we look forward to doing this again next month with some new topics. Jordan, anything you want to add there?
Real quick, I just want to go back on actually what I said, Precious. I did just double check that functionality. Editors do have some bulk options, but they do not have the option to change folder in bulk. So that, I guess, means it would be limited to admins and super admins. But other than that, thank you again, everybody, for joining. So again, sorry about a little bit of the disorganization in the beginning, but thanks so much for all the great questions. If you do have any more, please feel free to reach out to myself, to Daniel, to our support team. We're happy to answer those. We do also have the Reddit r/Hudu, as well as our MSP Geek channel, vHudu. If you have any other questions, or if you want to, get community suggestions on different things. Great for the Magic Dash and the API things that we were talking about. But yeah, most of all, thank you again for joining. This has been great, and hopefully we'll see you for the next one.
That's right. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. Thanks so much. And always reach out if there's anything we can help with. Bye.